been a study that we started a couple weeks ago that really just comes from the foundational understanding that we all have decisions to make. From small, seemingly unimportant decisions to extreme difficult decisions. The fact of the matter is, regardless of the level of decision making, we have countless decisions to make every day. And as believers, we want to make sure that we're making those decisions, or as the title is, we want to do decisions right. We want to make sure that we are going through the decision-making process in a biblical way, in a way that honors the Lord, in a way that He would have us to make decisions. And so tonight we're going to look at resource number 3. Remember, it's 10 weeks, okay? The first 5 weeks being resources, okay? 5 resources. Anybody remember resource number 1? A sober mind. A sober mind. And when we unpacked a sober mind, remember we were looking at the scriptures and we were unpacking and learning and discovering what a sober mind is. And we can summarize. Anybody want to summarize that? Just real simple, easy way to summarize. Everybody's scrambling for their notes. This is awesome. Grasping the big picture of decision making, but what is a sober mind? Thinking clearly. Okay? Clear thinking. And in that, what are some things we learned? What was the first thing we learned about a sober mind? We are decisional beings, okay? Meaning what? We make decisions about everything. Okay? And we went through the big old long list, right? We make relational decisions, vocational decisions, educational, missional, right? We make all these decisions on a daily basis. We are decisional beings. What was the second one? We are dependent, right? So we are dependent beings in that we are dependent upon what? Information in making decisions. And as Christians, our dependency should be where? On God. And seeking His counsel, seeking guidance and direction from Him because He directs our paths, right? And then we looked at what? We are destined. And when we talk about being destined, we are referring to God's plan and purpose for each and every one of us when He created us. No one was created just because. God has a deliberate and meaningful purpose for each and every one of us. And so we want to, we have a destiny, if you will. We've been predestined. We've been predetermined for God's plan. Okay? So in that study, we saw that we need to have, the first resource that we need to have in making decisions is a pure mind. Clear thinking and seeking God in making decisions. Then last week, we looked at resource number 2, which was a what? A pure heart. This was an exciting one, wasn't it? It was hard to learn, right? Understand that in preparation, I have to preach to myself first. And it was very helpful for me, okay? Pure heart. So what did we look at? What was something we noticed about a pure heart? What did we do first? We defined the heart, right? Remember? We defined it. Okay? So that's where we talked about the heart is our what? It's our thinker, our feeler, our wanter, right? It is the filter through which we process information. Okay? The desires of our heart, our wants, our feelings, our needs, right? Well, something else we looked at about the heart. The heart is directed. It can be directed. It will be directed. Okay? In that means that our heart can be directed towards God as well as directed away from him. Okay, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. We say it like this, or you've heard it said like this, I'm sure, countless times. Whatever you're putting in is what's coming out. Okay? So we know that our heart needs to be pure. We know it as a filter through which we process information in decision making, or the filter in which we process information during decision making. Our heart needs to be clean. It needs to be pure. Okay? And the reason it needs to be pure is because it can be directed. Okay? Everything that we're putting into it's going to push us to God or it's going to pull us away from Him. Okay? And everything we put in can do the opposite from what we put in before. Does that make sense? So if you put in biblical truths, it's going to push you towards God, right? But if you turn around and you're putting in something that's not biblical truth, let's say something that's very humanistic, is that pushing you towards Him further? No, it's pushing you away. And that's where we end up kind of doing this when it comes to our heart. And we're back and forth and bouncing off the walls, so to speak, on each side of the hallway. It's because now we're stuck in a truth, feeling, emotion kind of conflict, right? So what's something else we saw about our heart? It has to be decontaminated. Okay? It has to be purged. The impurities of our sinful nature, it is toxic to our heart. And that's got to be decontaminated. Well, very simply, how do we decontaminate our heart? Word of God. That's how we clean it up. Okay? That's how we purge it. Okay? So tonight we're going to look at resource number 3. Resource number 3 is a courageous spirit. This is kind of exciting. A courageous spirit. Take your Bibles and turn to Joshua chapter 1. A courageous spirit. So we trust at this point, Lord willing, we've got pure minds, or we're letting the Lord work through us and work in us to help our minds be sober, right? So we're working towards sober minds, level-headed, clear thinking, right? We are beginning to ask the Lord to help us in purifying our hearts, right? So we're working on these. Those are continual things, right? Those are things that our mind and our heart need to be continually fed and continually fed the proper spiritual food. Would you agree? A courageous spirit's kind of unique in that it's kind of there when we need it. Okay? Which is kind of a unique resource, right? Most of the times you think of, especially when we talk about decision making, think about a tool in a shed, right? During the summertime, we're out doing yard work, okay? Every time you do yard work, what do you pull out? Nope. At what tool? What tool? A rake every time you do yard work. Does everybody pull out a rake every time you do yard work? See, you said just about. What's a tool that you use every time? Lawnmower. A lawnmower. Well, Miss Bonnie don't have a whole lot of grass, so she could probably use a weed eater. Maybe she does use a rake. That's all she's got to do is just whack it down, right? But is it fair to say that most folks, other than our neighborhood right here because of the style of housing, wouldn't you say that most people, every time they go out to do yard work, they need a lawnmower? So what's another tool that you're going to need to make sure you can use that lawnmower? Gas. But what's a tool that we don't necessarily need every time? Do you always need a rake? Do you, this time of year you do, right? Do you always need the snowblower? Do you always need a shovel? Now you have those tools, right? But you don't always need them. And that's the difference between the last 2 weeks and tonight. A sober mind and a pure heart, we need those all the time. But a courageous spirit is that tool that we have hanging. We know it's there. We understand what it's for. We know when to use it. And we only grab it to use it when we need to use it. Now, here's where it kind of gets tricky and sounds contradictory. But it's not. We need it when we're making decisions. And we make decisions all the time. But the courageous spirit that we need to have for decision making, we kind of shift more towards those big ones. The ones that are not easy to make. Look with me, if you would, at Joshua chapter 1. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1. I think I put in your notes starting at verse 5, but I'm going to just go ahead and read from verse 1, okay? So follow along with me. Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. So essentially, what do we have taking place here? Joshua is basically just taking over for Moses, right? Okay, so it's just a change of responsibility, if you will, okay? Verse 4, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and under the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. So God's telling Joshua, look, I'm going to be with you just like I was Moses. Now this is something, remember, this is something that Joshua would have understood because Joshua was Moses' right-hand man. He was there. He was part of that inner decision-making circle, if you will. Okay, he was the staff, so to speak. Okay, he was part of the staff. The end of verse 5. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Now, here's what's interesting. Joshua has something going on. He's got a problem, okay? He has a problem with something that many of us have, and that's fear. Joshua has a problem with, he's afraid. He's scared. You say, Pastor, how do you get that? Well, look at verse 6. Be strong and of good courage. Why did God tell him to have courage? Because he knew he was scared. He had fear. Now, I'm not talking about the I'm frightened, like that scared me, startled me kind of fear. This is a responsibility type of fear, a fear that comes with when great decisions have to be made. Okay? It's that kind of fear. And that kind of fear really has to be harnessed because that kind of fear can actually keep us from making decisions, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Be strong and of a good courage. For unto this people shalt thou divide for inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous. There it is again, right? Be strong, be courageous. That thou mayest observe to do according to all the law, which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left. Don't turn away from what I'm telling you to do. I'm going to tell you what to do, and you just go. So what do we see here? God's telling Joshua, look, I'm going to tell you what direction to go. Don't go that way. Don't go that way. Go that way, the way that I pointed, right? And we're going to build on that a little bit also, okay? The end of verse 7, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. Verse 8, this book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. How many times has God said that to him? 3. Yeah, absolutely. Might be pretty important, right? You think Joshua's got some underlying fear issues? We all have underlying fear issues, don't we? There's now remember, this isn't the kind of fear, I'm not afraid of anything. No, we're all afraid of something. Maybe it's failure. Maybe it's disappointment. We can all be fearful. When it comes to decision making, specifically big decisions, always life-changing decisions, it can be fearful. There's just so many unknown factors. And we saw that last week when we were looking at a pure heart with the processes of making wrong decisions and the processes that go into right decisions. Remember, wrong decision making puts us in a position where we are asking ourselves, how do I feel? What do I want? We look at all the information, we weigh all the options, right? We weigh the pros and cons, do all the math, and then really ultimately we just have a best guess. We just take a guess. Well, that leads to wrong decisions. That's not a biblical right decision-making process. Biblical right decision-making process is seek God. What is God telling me to do? What is he trying to get my attention for? Where's the wisdom? Where's the discernment? Will this draw me closer to him? Will this draw me farther from him? Right? That's proper decision making. And it may be hard to connect an exact situation as you kind of think through and process in your mind. But at the end of the day, I really believe if you stop and you think through decision-making processes, you'll see a grave difference between what we naturally do and what we should do as believers. Verse 9. Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. Okay? Decisions that we make, look at those last few words, whithersoever thou goest. Decisions we make that are hard, that are difficult, that instill fear within us, are decisions that are forward in nature. They're decisions that we have to make that push us further in life or to the next stage or the next process, right? What makes it fearful? Well, there's unknown risk involved. We don't know. But look what God tells Joshua. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee. He's with thee. Why? Because God already knows what tomorrow holds. He's already there. And that's what he's telling Joshua. Don't be afraid. I'm already there. I know I just sprung this on you. I want you to take Moses' place and do everything that I told him to do. And keep moving forward. That's what he was saying. I want you to keep taking the Israelites and moving them forward in my plan for them. I want you to do that. And I know it's going to be fearful. And I know there's going to be things that you don't understand. But Joshua, I am already there tomorrow. I already know what tomorrow holds. So just keep going. Don't be fearful. Trust me. Let me guide you. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, Paul gives us very, very much the same sort of understanding. Okay? Ephesians chapter 6, what do we see? God is talking to the Ephesian church, and he's explaining the importance of them being gospel-centered and focused, gospel-focused, right? He talks first to the church and then to husbands and wives, right? And their responsibility to be gospel-centered to each other, and then parents to children, so on and so forth, right? And when we get to verse 10, what are we fixing to build into? What's that passage that comes right after verse 10 in Ephesians 6? Anybody remember right off? Putting on whole armor of God. Okay? You knew. I saw you. Right? So Ephesians 6:10, Paul says this, finally, my brethren. So look, I've explained all that to you about relationships and being gospel-centered. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Strength and power from Christ brings courage, tenacity, boldness. It is meek. What's meekness? What's an easy way for us to understand meekness that would tie into a courageous spirit? Anybody? I know you know. You just don't want to be on camera. You won't be. It's okay. It's pointing at me. Confidence or strength under control. Would you say Jesus was strength under control? Confidence under control? Absolutely he was. Jesus is God. He has ultimate power, right? And that's why I say power that we get from the Lord, his strength, his power, is courage, it's boldness, it's tenacity. There's something that I want to make sure that we understand when it comes to this idea of moving forward. And I know it's a lot of intro stuff, right? But it's that way every week, okay? When we're not moving forward, I want you to understand that when we're not moving forward, or we're not making decisions that lead us forward and take us forward, take us to the next phase, or where the direction God has for us. That has nothing to do with procrastinating or being lazy. It doesn't have anything to do with being cautious, okay? Because as believers, we don't need to procrastinate. We don't need to be cautious. Because if we're doing decisions right, we're making those decisions in whose power? Is there any reason to be cautious? Now, when I say cautious, I'm not meaning we throw all caution to the wind. I'm not saying that, okay? We can't be ignorant. God still gave us brains to think things through, right? But you know what I'm getting at. People have a tendency to, well, I'm waiting on the Lord. Sometimes you already know what you're supposed to do. But you say how many of you, be honest, how many of you have done it? I'm waiting on the Lord. You knew what he wanted, and you were still waiting on it. Okay? We've all done it. That's the point. Lord, are you sure? How many of you said, Lord, are you sure? I have. I have recently. I was like, Lord, are you sure? And then studying this, he's like, hey, knucklehead. It's like, Lord, forgive me. That's not procrastination. It's not being cautious. Why? Because if we're making decisions biblically, if we're doing decisions right, we're using his power. And his power is courage and boldness and tenacity. The reason that we can't blame procrastination, the reason we can't blame cautiousness is because really the truth of the matter is if we're not moving forward, it's because really we're just afraid of the outcome. But as Christians, as those who have placed their faith and trust in Jesus Christ, we must remember that he's already there. He already knows. In his sovereignty, specifically his omniscience, he already knows what's waiting. He already knows what's coming. So you can say, well, I'm just being careful. I don't want to do anything before it's time. I don't want to do anything too soon. But if you know God is leading you to do it, are you being cautious? Or are you afraid of the outcome? And the reason I went that direction is I want us to think about Joshua for a couple more minutes. He's used to being in Moses' shadow, right? I mean, he was there. He knew everything, but he didn't get in trouble, did he? He wasn't the one everybody was mad at. He just kind of got to stand there and enjoy it, right? Think of it this way. Who does the church get mad at? The pastor. They don't get mad at the deacons. Now, the deacons are part of the decision-making process. But they're in the shadow of the pastor. Not that the pastor's overshadowing them, but in the shadow as the figurehead like Moses, the figurehead's the one that people attack. I can't believe Moses did this. I can't believe he did this, right? Well, in churches we do that too. I can't believe Pastor did this. And the deacons are sitting back there learning and absorbing and Lord willing, paying attention, right? But they're not the object of that struggle. They're not the focus of that strife and contention. Are you with me? Does that make sense? That's where Joshua was at. He was used to being in Moses' shadow. When the people got upset in the desert and they found themselves trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea, they didn't yell at Joshua. Who'd they yell at? Moses. Now, here's what I say. Joshua has a fear of the outcome. That's why God's told him 3 times, be strong and of good courage. Because God knows that he's afraid of the outcome. Joshua's not being cautious. He watched Moses get beat up by the people that he was trying to lead. And it made him reluctant. It made him hesitant. But the fact of the matter was this, is that God was calling Joshua to lead, to be that guy out front, to be the one taking God's plan and leading people in a direction. And so God told him, the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. I've got you. That's what he was saying. That God was saying, Joshua, I got you. I need you to do this. I am calling you to do this. Now, now remember back to we are destined. Okay? Meaning we are all predestined for God's purpose. He has a plan for each and every one of us. Is that a calling? Absolutely it is. So if God has a plan for you, Brother Eduardo, will he or will he not be with you whithersoever you go? Of course he will. Because that's the plan he has for you. But all too often, like Joshua, we don't know the outcome. And we forget God knows the outcome. Now we know he knows it. But in the moment, we lose sight of the fact that God already knows the outcome. And we let those things creep in, right? We start being nervous about being out front. And receiving all the focus like Joshua. And you know, he didn't want the spotlight. He knew he didn't want to deal with critics. He didn't want to deal with failure. He didn't want to deal with change. And maybe he was even fearful of some of the freedoms that he would give up. Your life changes. As life changes and God leads us, things around us don't look the same as they once did, do they? Joshua knew that it was coming. And God said, don't be afraid. What was God saying? You need a courageous spirit. If you're going to do decisions right, you need a courageous spirit. And that's why I said this, that a courageous spirit is a courageous spirit is a skill set that's ready to access when you need it. Okay? It's that tool that is there in a moment's notice when you need it. So let's look at just a few things about a courageous spirit. First off, courage decides forward. Courage decides forward. Now let's unpack this a little bit. Exodus chapter 14. If we go back to Exodus chapter 14, it's in your notes. And I'm actually using your notes tonight because I was tired of typing. So I didn't type through all my hand jam notes. I read and study and take notes, and then I go through and type and clean it all up, and I was just tired of typing. So I'm just going with my hand jammer. See? Got them all over the place. But if you go to Exodus 14, verse 15, and the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they what? What are those 2 words? Go forward. Courage decides forward. That is to say that courage decides if we're going to go forward. Courage is the thing that pushes us forward. Courage is the tool, the resource needed in decision making to ensure that we go forward. Now, what was going on with Moses and the Israelites in Exodus 14? Anybody remember? Where were they at? I already kind of hinted to it. They were in between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea. They started flipping out on Moses, didn't they? It would have been better for us to die in Egypt. Right? Because they're trapped. Do they see a positive outcome or a fearful outcome? A fearful outcome. What is their fear? They're going to go back. We're going to get slaughtered or enslaved in Egypt again. And in their minds, what is the only way forward? Death. It's a sea. You can't see the other side of it. Moses, we can't swim across this thing. How many have been in the Great Lakes? You seen the Great Lakes? Some. You can't see the other side. I got to see the Pacific. Well, I got to see several oceans, but let me tell you this about the Pacific Ocean. From the flight deck of an aircraft carrier looking out, I don't remember exactly what they said, taught us or told us, but it's something like 24 miles to the horizon. Look, I've been out in the Pacific Ocean long enough to know that I didn't see anything for 24 miles. For 3 months. We just drove around, all around that thing, never got close to land. And you're like, okay, Pastor, but it's the Pacific Ocean. Well, in the Persian Gulf. Not much bigger than the Red Sea, really. I mean, it's like about 6 times the size. Width-wise, I think it's like 3.5 times the width of the Red Sea. My point is, even when we left the Pacific and moved into the Persian Gulf, we didn't see land for months. I'm not saying like we were just doing little bitty circles. No. We were doing big circles and stayed away from shore. Do you know how, does anybody know the distance from a coastline that water becomes international water? Does anybody know? 12 miles. So if the horizon is 24 miles and you don't see land, you're not in anybody's water space. You're double the distance. Does that make sense? I remember pulling into Hong Kong and just seeing the faintest flicker of light ever so often right on the surface of the water. The next morning, when I woke up and went outside, that little flicker, that little green flicker, was the top of like a 90-something story building. What am I saying? It's distance. It's afar off. The children of Israel are sitting here and they see Pharaoh's army coming and the dust cloud. And if they didn't see the chariot, I'm sure they didn't see the chariots and the men and the horses, but this massive dust cloud, and they turn around and it's just water as far as the eye can see. They are in a fearful position because they don't know the outcome. They don't know what's coming. But look what God does. God doesn't direct our steps. God doesn't say, just stand still and take it. I got it. No, he doesn't do that, does he? Now, this doesn't make sense to the Israelites, does it? What do you mean go forward? Where are we supposed to go? But God says, don't stand still. Don't stand still. Go. And when God tells us to go, he directs our steps. He points and says, Moses, take them that way. Are you with me? Are you following me? In our decision-making process, we need to have a courageous spirit, and it's that courage that decides forward. It's the courage that we get from God, His courage, the courage that we have as children of God, that we are able to utilize and access when the time comes so that we can go forward. Not that we can move forward in any direction, but that so that we will move forward in His direction, the direction that He points. Okay? Why? Because we don't see the other side of the water. Are you with me? We don't know what's over there. But God does, and that takes courage. He knows the outcome. We don't, and that's a fearful thing. But when it comes to doing decisions right, we have to have courage to follow in the direction that He told us to go. The fact of the matter is this, that most people, most Christians tend to wait until God reveals to them His plan. But that's not faith. Well, I'm waiting on the Lord, waiting on the Lord, waiting on the Lord. How much you want Him to tell you? How long do you expect Him to point before you just follow the steps, take the steps? How long are you going to stand there and claim, I'm waiting on the Lord, I'm waiting on the Lord? That's what the Israelites were doing. They were standing still, waiting on the Lord, waiting on the Lord. But were they really? No, they were fearful. They were afraid. They didn't know what lay ahead of them. The fact of the matter is this, is courage will push us forward. It will guide us forward. Courage is the very thing, the very tool that we access in times of decision making where we say, okay, Lord, not my will, but thine, and we take that step. What do we call taking that step, Miss Cherry? Step of faith. Now, let's touch on, let's go back just a second and talk about that waiting on the Lord part. I will be the first person to tell you, don't get ahead of Him. Wait on Him. Okay? Wait on the Lord. He'll tell you. When I say stop, we need to make sure that we stop saying, waiting on the Lord, waiting on the Lord. You've all been in a situation, I'm sure, where you've had a decision to make, you knew what God wanted you to make, and you just kept praying for guidance. Are you with me? Anybody been there? Be honest, we all have. It's okay. That's the time where we need to stop using waiting on the Lord as an excuse. Okay? Because what is that? Disobedience. If you know what God wants you to do, if you have a clear mind, if you have a sober mind, if you have a pure heart, go grab that tool of courage and step. Just follow Him. Just trust Him. Take the step of faith. Follow Him. If He's given you an answer. The fact of the matter is this, and I say this all the time too, and so please understand that this is nothing new. It's just the way that we're putting it together is different. Okay? But I know you've heard me say this. I totally lost track of thought, to be honest with you. The fact of the matter is this, we need to make sure that we are moving forward. Okay? This courage helps us make decisions that move us forward. So we're not waiting on the Lord, waiting on the Lord, waiting on the Lord. We're no longer saying, are you sure? Lord, I believe this is what you're telling me, but are you sure? Well, I don't know about changing jobs. Well, I like my house. I don't want a new car. I don't want to invite so-and-so over for dinner. Whatever it is. At what point do we expect God to reveal to us everything going on? That's what I was going to tell you. I've said it before. God doesn't have to reveal His plan to us. He says, Paul, I want you to do this. I want you to go there. And my responsibility is to say, Lord, you want me to go to that door? And He says, yes, knucklehead. Are you sure? No, that's not how it works. God says, I want you to go that way. But Lord, I don't know what's over there. I don't care. Go. And what is my responsibility at that point? To tap into His courage and take the step. Are you with me? Does that make sense? Look at Proverbs chapter 16. A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his what? Steps. Your heart will come up with its own way. We saw that last week, but God directs his children's steps. And in directing steps, he says, go that way. Would you say as a church, we are focused right now on moving forward, leaving the past behind us? As hard as that may be, how many of you admit it can be hard at times, right? Would you say that we have a natural tendency to say, Lord, are you sure we're supposed to be doing this? I'm not picking on anybody. I mean, that's just a natural, it's different, right? It's a new direction. But we have to remember what Solomon wrote in Proverbs. He directs our paths. He's not saying just go off blind. No. God is saying go that way. Directing our paths is pointing in the direction that we are to go. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thy own what? Understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge who? Him. And he shall do what? Direct thy path. Lord, I'm not going to lean on my own understanding because I don't know what's on the other side of that door. But I know that you want me to go through that door. So I'm trusting you. And he's already told us he's not going to leave us alone. He's going with us. Remember, he doesn't take us to a situation in life. He takes us what? Through it. God takes us through. He doesn't just say, okay, here it is, have fun. No, he doesn't do that. He says, no, I want you to go this way. Come on. And we reach out and we grab his hand. By what? Faith. And we say, okay, Lord, I trust you. I'm going to go. Not because I know the outcome. That's wrong decision making. But because I know that you know the outcome. And I trust you, regardless of how hard it's going to be. The second thing we need to learn, or the second thing we need to know about courage is courage avoids indecision. A courageous heart looks at the direction that God is pointing and steps out on faith. Courageously stepping out. Okay? Which is an avoidance of indecision. There's this mental game that takes place within us, this waiting versus this mental game of I'm waiting on the Lord, right? We've already touched on it a couple times, and so I want to explain it and make sure we understand this indecision that's created by saying, well, I'm waiting on the Lord. Really what we're doing, we say, well, I'm waiting on the Lord. I'm waiting on the Lord. I'm waiting on the Lord. We're trying to spiritualize it. What are we trying to spiritualize? Our disobedience. We're trying to make our disobedience be more spiritual. That's what I mean by spiritualized. Not mystical, but sound more spiritual, more biblical. But it always comes back to this. What are you waiting on? I'm waiting on clarity. How clear does that have to get? Are you following me? Like, it sounds silly, but this stuff ain't hard. We just miss it. Why do we miss it? Because we get fearful. Tomorrow scares us, doesn't it? I'm going to ask you this question. And be honest. I want you to be honest, okay? How many of you were fearful about the roof offering? Be honest. Were you? Okay. Why? You don't have to answer that. Don't answer that. Well, why were you fearful about the roof offering? God already knows, doesn't he? So you see what I'm getting at? So this is very practical for us. Look, we don't know what God has for us moving forward. We don't have a clue. In the condition of our country right now, we don't know anything about what's going on. But what do we know? That God will draw all men unto him. We know that he is working in the hearts of people around the globe right now. We know that he is the one who places authority. And regardless of what authority he allows to be the authority, do we trust him? Or do we wait for clarity? Are you with me? Does that make sense? We have to have courage. Like never before, Christians must have courage, because courage helps us avoid indecision. We don't have to worry about what to do. Because the fact of the matter is this: indecision is basically when somebody's indecisive, they're not deciding to make a, they're deciding to not make a decision. Did that come out right? So they're making a decision to not make a decision. That's what indecision is. So you've already made a decision. And your decision, it was actually disobedience, because God's clearly told you what he wants for you. I don't know. Maybe he wants you to be a preacher. Maybe he wants you to be a missionary. Maybe he wants you to be, and I'm picking on you just because you let me. I don't know what he has for you, brother. I don't know. And I'm not picking on him. It's just an illustration, okay? He's young, right? He's stepping out. I don't know what God has for you. I have no clue what God has for you. You don't know what he has for you. Maybe you're waiting on clarity. Maybe you do know. I had a similar talk with Brother Mike about the job situation. I said, does God want you to have that job? He goes, well, I thought so. I said, did you follow him? Yeah. Did the job pan out? No. Would you say that was courageous? Did he know the outcome? No. But God knew the outcome. God knew. Isn't that exciting? So don't let decisions ultimately, don't let your lack of decision making ultimately cause you to disobey. Acknowledge rather that we need the courage from the Lord to avoid indecision. Psalm 37:23, the steps of a good man are ordered what? By the Lord. He orders your steps. We already saw that. Okay? And he delighteth in his way. Who delights in whose way? From that verse, who delights in whose way? Huh? The good man delights in God's way. That's where your delight is. Lord, I don't know. Here's how that translates. Lord, I don't know what's on the other side of that door, but I know you want me to go through that door, so you've got a plan on the other side of that door, so I'm just going to go. It's going to be exciting. Right? And I'm not going to do it because it's chilly out. And there's probably a skunk out there, right? That thing's been hiding. Are you with me? That's what's going on. I need to avoid indecision. I have the courage of the Lord to go because he directs my paths. He tells me which way to go. And I delight in his ways. Is there not, how many of you, be honest now, say, the most delight there is in life is knowing you're right smack dab in the middle of God's will? Is it not just a peaceful place to be? Right where God wants you. Then why in the world don't we always want to be there? Because we get scared. We get scared. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 12. I'm not going to read all the verses, but they're there in your notes. Look at verse 12. For the which cause I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed. For what? For I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. We have got to stop choosing to retreat in fear and be more willing to go forward in faith. Lastly, courage confronts its enemies. So what are the enemies? What are the enemies of courage? Okay, so here's how we're going to fill this in and we're done. So the first thing we see in Joshua 1, underneath the blank line there, what is the first attribute of courage that we see in Joshua 1? Be strong. What is the enemy of being strong? Weak. I would say this: apathy. Meaning, I don't care. Whatever. I don't care. Would you say that apathy and an I don't care attitude is an enemy of being strong? Is that I don't care attitude, is it not, is it or is it not nothing more than an excuse to be fearful? Does it or does it not help you justify being fearful? Sure it does. Because we're commanded to be strong. So let's look at the second strength of courage, or the second attribute of courage. What is it? There in your notes, what is it? Of good courage. Yep. So what's the enemy of courage? Fear. It's fear. But if you have courage, you confront these enemies. If you have the courage of the Lord, you do care. You have the strength to care because you know He's directing your path. If you're using the courage of the Lord, you have courage. You're not fearful because you know He knows the answer. He knows the outcome, and it's the way that He wants you to go. And it could all fall apart in man's eyes, but it's all working together beautifully in God's plan. There's no reason to be fearful. Look at Joshua 1:8 underneath that line there. This book of the law shall not depart out of my mouth, but thou shalt what? Meditate. So when we talk about meditating, what are we talking about? Thinking on it, dwelling on it, bathing it in prayer, observing, being consumed by. Well, what are we being consumed by? The book of the law. So what are we consuming ourselves with? And if that is an attribute of courage, then what would the enemy of meditation be? Which is, come on, you know, Ms. Bonnie, as soon as I say it, you're going to be like, really? Ignorance. See, I told you about it. Yep. Ignorance. Ignorance is an enemy. But here's the thing. Having courage of the Lord helps us stand in ignorance. I don't care that I don't know what's on the other side of that door. It's fine. That doesn't scare me. It doesn't bother me. Why? Because in the Lord's strength, I know that He knows what's over there. I know that He knows what's over there because He's told me. I've studied, I've meditated, I've dwelt on, I've built a personal relationship with the Father. I know Him. And I know. I don't head knowledge know, but heart knowledge know. Are you with me? We understand. Genuinely, deeply, wholly understand, because we've meditated on the Word, that He's working all things for our good. That He is working in us to bring honor and glory to Himself. How do we know that? Because we're meditating on His words. We are dwelling on His Word. And if we're doing that, if we're taking what we know about God and we're learning and we're getting to know Him better, there's no room for ignorance. The last enemy. Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid. Neither be thou what? Dismayed. Troubled. worried. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. The fifth enemy of courage is distraction. Distraction. Be focused. Don't be discouraged. Don't be drug away. Don't be distracted. Kind of ties in with ignorance, doesn't it? Oh, I skipped one, didn't I? We'll get to it. Sorry, the last one's distraction. Okay? Courage is what we take from the knowledge and wisdom that we gain by spending time with the Lord and spending time in His Word. We are able to fight against we are able to fight against ignorance and the things that would normally distract us don't distract us. Why? Because we know through our relationship with the Lord that He wants us to go through the door. He doesn't want me to come up here and go down this aisle first. That's ignorance. He doesn't want me to come up the steps. No. He didn't guide that path. The path that God guided was that one. I need to make sure that this doesn't distract me. Whatever's on the left, whatever's on the right, can't distract me. Courage helps me ignore those distractions. Sometimes those distractions can seem like very good things, very positive things. Let's say that God told me to go out the door, and He's pointed right here. But I could go back to the sound booth or out to the foyer, let's say, and I could grab a jacket and gloves and a hat and scarf. That would sound good, right? I mean, it's chilly. Not that chilly, but you know what I'm saying. So it seems like it would be good for me to go out, collect those things, and then come back and go in the door, right? But God didn't direct that path. He directed that one. He didn't direct that one. Are you with me? Or I could go up on the platform, grab my keys, grab my wallet, turn the light off, come down, go out. But did God direct that path? No. He directed this one. Are you with me? An enemy of courage is distraction. Because, see, God is clearly calling me to go out that door. But I'm distracted by what's possibly on that. Well, it might be cold, so I need to go get this. Well, it might be, I might not be able to get back in. Well, we could stay there for a minute. How many times God tells us to do something, we want to go back? Well, I digress. We'll leave that alone. The point is this, that do you understand that it becomes a distraction? Distractions will be an enemy to decision making. We will think that we're doing what God wants us to do, but He has already clearly defined and told us what we're going to do. The one we skipped, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein, for then thou shalt make thy ways prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. What do we see taking place in verse 8 here? What do we see? Obedience. What's the enemy of obedience? Disobedience or rebellion. All of your answers are correct. But the reason I chose the word rebellion over disobedience is we can half-heartedly disobey. Meaning, we had good intentions, we didn't realize we were disobeying. Okay? Rebellion is blatant disregard. I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't know what's on the other side of that door, so I'm not going out it. Are you with me? That's rebellion. That's why I chose rebellion over disobedience, because disobedience can be an accident. Have you ever disobeyed and you didn't realize it? Yeah, sure you have. Have you ever rebelled and not realized it? No. You knew. Okay? So it's 5 enemies. Courage confronts its enemies. It gets in their face. That's why if you look at the title, dealing face on with fear, or face to face with fear. Courage gets in the face of its enemies. Why? Because ultimately, here's where it boils down. Nothing matters more than what God said to go do. No ifs, ands, buts about it. No questions. No arguments. Not waiting for clarity. You know, there's things you don't understand. You understand that maybe people aren't going to like you. You understand that maybe my family is going to be mad at me. Maybe I'm going to be laughed at. Maybe I'm going to be mocked. But you are doing everything the way God says He wants you to do it. Courage allows you to do that. I'm going to close with an illustration. Brother Mark, I need you to go ahead and start shutting this down, please, so I can close with an illustration. Just